type of controversies ensue, if there are any more, but there's at least one more. And that's regarding our former colleague at ESPN, Adam Schefter. And he's gotten caught up in the mix of this. And basically, Rob, apparently Bruce Allen, the former president of the Washington football team, was one of Adam's sources.
Yep, that's obvious.
And in covering the lockout or potential lockout, am I right, at that time in 2011, Adam wrote a story about the lockout and sent it to Bruce Allen for him to proofread.
No, for him to edit. Right.
Yeah, and he asked him, is there anything that needs to be changed, tweaked, added? Changed, added, or tweaked, I believe was the language. And he called him Mr. Editor. And so obviously, that's something that generally does not happen. You send in a story to a source, an entire story for them to edit. And so Adam's caught some flack. So Rob G. Reed, Adam released a statement.
Yeah, now this is interesting, Chris, because a lot of his contemporaries and friends were trying to stick up for him. He's acknowledging that this is not standard practice in this apology, okay? So for people who are on social media and they're reading Darren Ravel and some other people who are trying to convince you that this is standard practice in journalism, I'm here to tell you, it is not, okay?
Here's what Adam said.
Fair questions are being asked about my reporting approach on an NFL lockout story from 10 years ago. Just to clarify, it's common practice to verify facts of a story with sources before you publish in order to be as accurate as possible. In this case, I took the rare step of sending the full story in advance because of the complex nature of the collective bargaining talks. It was a step too far, and, looking back, I shouldn't have done it. The criticism being levied is fair. With that said, I want to make this perfectly clear. In no way did I, or would I, cede editorial control or hand over final say about a story to anyone ever.
That's what he did. That's what he did. He can say he would never do it. Chris, what did he do when he called him Mr. Editor? Did he not turn it over? What do you need to add? What needs to be tweaked? What else did he say?
Changed, added, or tweaked.
Is that what an editor does? Change, add, and tweak, Chris? They might twerk too, but change, add, and tweak.
Yeah, editors don't add. Generally, I've had editors add in a mistake before.
Oh, I've had that too. Like
which
overzealous,
is highly upsetting.
Like that's the worst thing you can do.
My name's on there, right?
Nobody knows, right? Chris, you know what mine was? I was working at the Daily News. I did a Jets Indianapolis Colts sidebar from a Jets game.
Right.
You know the Jets, the tabloid style is looser. So you normally don't have to put the city of the team with it. You would just say, hey, the Jets did something, or you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't have to put the New York Jets because it's a tabloid. The guy trying to help me out put in Baltimore Colts.
Wow.
They were playing the Indianapolis Colts.
Wow.
Chris, I woke up, I read the story, I saw it, my heart sunk. I ran to my laptop, right, to see if I wrote that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course I didn't. It didn't have any city with it, right? It just said Colts, and he added in
Baltimore. So even on
Baltimore.
first reference, you didn't put the city. Okay.
Because it's a sidebar in a tabloid.
Right.
I just didn't.
Right.
But anyway, Chris and I are good to speak to this, and people were asking questions because of our backgrounds. Both of us went to school to be journalists. Both of us have written for newspapers. Chris wrote for the New York Times, which is probably has the highest standard of any newspaper in this country and maybe the world, okay? And this is not a common practice. This gives you insight because I doubt in even Adam talking about for Chris, if you want to proof check some facts, you can call
fact checking
back.
Is absolute, right?
Yes.
Usually, whenever I fact check, it's on the phone.
Right, you would call the guy up and say, "Right, I want to go over this
quote or whatever." Or is this fact correct? These numbers right? Something like that. I mean, Rob, I don't know Adam that well. I mean, I know him,
Right.
you know, okay.
Same with me. I don't know him that
like
well.
him.
We worked. Right.
Yeah, I respect him. He's obviously, you know, become a terrific newsbreaker, obviously. But as he said, this is not common practice. I've never even thought about sending an entire story to somebody, a source. But the only thing I've ever done that was remote, I wouldn't even say close, but I was doing a story for ESPN, the magazine, and this is, I don't know, 2006 maybe. It was with LeBron. I say with LeBron because we watched the movie Glory Road together. Remember that movie, Glory Road? Mm-hmm. Where the first all-black starting five basketball team.
That's a great story.
Yeah, Texas Western won the national championship. So I watched that with LeBron, and then I did an interview with him on his feelings on the movie. Right, it was in the first person. So I was, and we got into other stuff. That's when he actually told me he'd never go chase rings and things like that. And so I interviewed him, and then I wrote the story in first person, like it was LeBron's words.
Writing, not you.
So I'm literally putting words into his mouth. I take the quotes, but I gotta, you know, you have to transition them and make them make sense and all that.
Right.
So I was like, look, that's in his words. I think it's fair to run this by him, and then I sent it to him. They okayed it. It looks good. That's my voice. And then we went with it for ESPN the magazine. But that, you know, that's not a news story. That's right. It was literally written in his words. Similar to when he went back to Cleveland. Remember what he did with Sports Illustrated?
Right.
It was in his words. I'm sure that's the same thing he did with Lee.
That's not the same as going to a source. And here's the other thing. You know, about being fair and accurate and trying to get it right. Do you think Adam sent that story to the union for their side? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, he didn't.
Of course not.
He didn't.
That's why I'm saying, like, all right, I'm writing a story kind of ripping on the union about what their stance and what's going on. Let me send it to the union so I can get their side. No. So I think that people who are trying to mislead people and tell them and blur the line in journalism and act as if, I'm glad to see that response statement from Schefter, because I don't think that if he would have let those people portray it as this is how he does his business, right, and how he deals with sources and he sends stories for them for approval, that is not journalism. You know what that is? That's collusion. That's not journalism.
And darn near, or PR.
Right. You work for a PR firm.
Public relations.
Right. Yeah, when you're letting the person you write about dictate the story flow and what's in it and what's not in it.
Yeah, that is not, it's certainly not common practice at all. But a lot of ways this stuff is broken now, transactional stuff, you know, guys, I'm not saying Adam, I don't know what he does, but, you know, guys make deals with agents. You get tight with an agent, you write things from their perspective.
Yes, they do.
You write things from their perspective. Or you won't write any negative things about them or an executive with another team.
This is what's going on.
So they give you information, right? And I've even heard of guys, if there were stories that, you know, like there was a negative story about a source, guys wouldn't write it. Guys wouldn't write it because
act like it's not there. I can't
because
write that.
That's their source. And even a lot of this, like, when you see a transaction broken, a trade or something, a lot of it comes from agents. Some now comes from executives, of course, but a lot of it, I'd say probably most of it, certainly contracts, signings,
oh yeah, no, it's agents.
You know, numbers, right? That comes from agents, and a lot of times the agent will call a person, a reporter, that his tightest reporter, give it to him, and then 30 seconds later call his next tightest reporter. You know, give it to him. And then by that point, it's out and it gets all over the place. And Rob, that's the difference between nowadays with social media and when it was just newspapers. When you broke a story for the Daily News back in the day, or I broke a story for the New York Times, people had to buy that newspaper
Yes.
to read the story. And that was why one reason breaking news was so important. Not the only one, of course. Getting the news out is the main thing, but it helped your paper.
No doubt.
Because people had to buy it. Even if I usually read the Post, I got to buy
saw
the
the
Daily
back
News.
page,
I got to buy the
right.
Times now to read it.
Right. You're like, the Times has this story. I want to read it, Chris.
Right.
So I
Right.
got to buy that paper. And the same thing in the old days, in the newspaper days, we used to hold the story out of the first edition and hold it until the last edition. You know why? If we put it in the first edition, and I work at the Daily News, then the Times and the Post can go grab our story, get their own sources, and then write a story like it's their own.
Exactly.
Right? Not using
we
my
did
information.
that several times. Yep. Writing for no
Right?
doubt. Back in the day, that's how it was. And you might get a scoop in the morning or an afternoon.
And you'd have to
And you're
hold
just
it.
praying that the other papers don't get it. You know, because you'd have to hold it. There was no Twitter. You couldn't put it right out. You'd have to hold it until the next morning or write it that night, and it would come out the next morning. All right.